Welcome to the Journey to Happy podcast, where you get concrete tools for mindset work, my best tips for lowering your anxiety. And you also hear funny and encouraging stories from me and others who have stories to share. Around here, you'll discover the easy way to stop overthinking, to get rid of self doubt, and finally embrace a calmer, more confident you. I am Olga, your host, a former therapist, a life coach, wife, blissfully an IVF mother, and a coffee lover. I'm excited that you tune in today, and I'm honored to be on the journey with you. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Journey to Happy. I am today with a very special guest, Chelsea Connors, who is also a former therapist, also a life coach. She works primarily with I'll let you explain who you work with and how do you help them. But we're pretty much, I feel like, on the same wave of helping, and I feel that our approaches are very similar, which is why I've invited you to have this conversation with me. This month, in one of my coaching cohorts, I'm talking all about creating healthy boundaries within a relationship, breaking some of the tendencies of codependency that we may have created due to either attachment issues or simple ideas that we grew up thinking that's what's normal and aiming for that. And I've heard Chelsea talk deeply about the importance of keeping healthy relationships and how to, and something that I don't think I shared with you last time, Chelsea. This is take two, by the way, guys. We had recorded this and sound didn't collaborate. So I am forever thankful, Chelsea, that you're doing this a second time with me. I know my audience would just benefit so much from hearing you. One of the things I thought about when I invited you is that I think you have such a graceful way of talking about relationships and making things that otherwise our mind will tell us are complicated and difficult to do. You really have a way to make it seem so normal and so easy. Even if we're talking about a breakup or walking away from something that is not no longer in our best interest, I have seen your stories. I see how you talk about these things, and for the anxious mind, I find it so appeasing, and like things that I think I would have struggled with in my early 20s, for example. Had I met you then, I think I would have like fly by some of these things that I struggle with. So welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for doing this a second time. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what brought you into this line of work, and who is it that you serve?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me and inviting me in round two. I'm so excited to be here. And a little bit about me, like you mentioned, started out my working career as a traditional psychotherapist and have since transitioned to doing more coaching work. And I really focus on supporting mostly older young adults, I would say, of like navigating all of the emotional ups and downs that come throughout our lives that we weren't necessarily fairly prepared for, or we didn't necessarily have a lot of education or understanding of how to navigate it from an emotional and mental health perspective, which I think you just touched upon really beautifully. And your words mean so much to me because that's a lot of why I do this work is I want to make things that we all go through at one point or another that are deeply complex feel okay to talk about. Feel like, okay, this is hard. This sucks. This may challenge me in a lot of ways. This might not be something that I want to choose. And I'm at the point where I'm facing this thing, whether it be a breakup, like you mentioned, whether it be a career change, whether it be something with our health, whether it be a loss and grief, right? Like these are things that as human beings, I have seen we all face. And yet there's so little conversation or preparation around like, well, what do I do when I'm doubting myself? Or how do I navigate that anxious mind? Or what if I feel like I need to constantly be quote unquote succeeding or performing in order to be worthy or valuable? And I'm not quite doing that or meeting that in my life right now, and adjusting a lot of that internal dialogue. And so that is a lot of the work that I do with my clients is how do we take things like self-doubt or anxiety or emotional overwhelm, and get to a place where you really have cultivated a deep, deep, loving connection with yourself, and then utilizing that as the ground that you stand on to go out and live your life in all of these different ways, with who you're with how you spend your time, with what you do that matters to you. And really trying to normalize more of that conversation so it doesn't seem so taboo, or like I shouldn't need to talk about these things. Of course, you need to talk about these things. These are some of the hardest pieces of being human. So
Yeah.
that's my spiel about all the work that I do.
Oh, I'm so thankful that you gave us your spiel, because it's anytime I bring somebody to the podcast, I have intentionally selected them thinking they can really speak to this one subject. And I am never shocked that every single human I've brought into the podcast has like such a strong passion to do the work that they do. And often comes from a place of like, we experienced something similar, we've been there. And so yes, that is fitting that you describe what you do and to go to that extent of explanation. Let's dive into this codependency in relationships. And I don't know, should we define codependency for our listeners? Like, do you want to give your definition? And by the way, guys, we're not textbooks. We're just telling, in our opinion, what we think codependency is. I'll let you, Chelsea, kind of describe that so that we can just center this
Yeah.
conversation based on that. And I know you have a great explanation as per our take one.
Yeah. So when I think about the definition of codependency, and I know I mentioned this in our first conversation, but codependency is a word and a term that I am oftentimes hesitant to rely on, because I think that it sometimes can overcomplicate our need as human beings to be in relationship with other people. When I think about codependency, how I differentiate someone who is codependent, has codependent tendencies versus someone who is in relationship, is when the relationship gets to a place where we are outsourcing how we make our decisions and what we view as okay, or what we give ourselves permission to do or not do, that we need somebody else to validate us or give us permission or agree with us in order to then move forward, take the action, say the thing, feel the way we're feeling, so on and so forth. So it's like we are becoming not our own person in relationship. And that's where I start to see codependent behaviors, codependent tendencies that really take away from a person being in a healthy relationship. But I think it sometimes can be really, really overly utilized, where then everything where people's like, but I like having some form of validation. Am I codependent? And then feeling like they're wrong or bad in relationship. So I have such a like, I'm very light with this word because it is now becoming more and more and more widespread. And are there people who have codependent tendencies? Absolutely. Do we all probably have codependent tendencies in some ways? Absolutely. But it's also okay to rely on the people that we're in relationship with to a healthy extent. And so finding that line is really important.
Yeah, I agree. So one of the reasons I'm very passionate about this subject I had shared with you, Chelsea, is because I do feel that this is something that followed me in relationships in my 20s. And when I was 27, I got married to husband number one.
Mhm.
And when I was turning 30, I was already divorced to husband number one, who I
Mhm.
had been in a relationship for a total of 5 years. And it was a significant relationship.
Yeah.
Ending that marriage, I decided to do psychoanalysis, and I went into therapy for a full year for one big purpose. I had noticed a pattern in my life. I had noticed that no matter who I was dating, it appeared as though I was always dating the same human. Like,
Mm.
same guy showed up, the same issues showed up where I didn't feel as appreciated or as worthy. And in the end, I would walk away from these relationships feeling like, there has to be somewhere out there who's going to see my value, But breaking up my marriage was incredibly difficult because there was a lot of love from my part, and I don't want to minimize all the other issues that there were that really justified a walking away from the marriage.
Sure.
I don't talk much about it because it involves two of us, and I don't feel that it is in my rights to share everything that goes on. I feel deep respect for my ex-husband, and so I
Sure.
keep it that way. But what I do, my favorite definition of codependent tendencies is what that therapist said to me once. Olga, wouldn't you love to love and be in a relationship where, should that relationship end, you're going to feel their absence
Mhm.
because they're no longer in your life,
Mhm.
but your self love remains intact? And I think, like I was saying to you, I don't remember much of what happened in those sessions, like at all. But I will never forget that invitation to love myself in such a deep way that whether my partner was there or not, I would my self love would remain intact, which I think in my own 20s, this is something that would not be the case. That if my boyfriend didn't bring me flowers, I didn't bring myself flowers. That if my boyfriend didn't want to go for a walk, I wouldn't go for that walk. And that deeply, if they didn't show me, like you were saying, externally that love, that I wouldn't feel loved, or that I wouldn't take the actions that would make me feel loved. And that was healing for me to hear those words and to make that a purpose. So I immediately broke the patterns that I had been following because I no longer went for people who were emotionally unavailable. I noticed, like, oh, that's what I've been bringing into my life.
Uh-huh.
Projects, people that I would love helping, but they were not available to love themselves or me. And it showed me my responsibility of showing up to the relationship with myself. And
Yeah.
I know we hear a lot about this. And so that's why I want to focus a little bit about how do we break away from the chains of codependent tendencies, because
Mhm.
I have met people who are full blown codependent,
Mhm.
who have attachment issues for sure. They've had a very difficult upbringing.
Mhm.
Those are the exceptions. I think that many, 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 as you said, of us have like those codependency tendencies. We're not fully on codependent on somebody, but we do want that external validation. We do want to do things together. We do feel that without our partner, we couldn't breathe. And so it's just kind of having that fine balance. Now, as I've been discussing this with my coaching group, the question that keeps coming back to me that I think would be cool for both of us to break down is it codependent of me to want to please others? That I want to make my partner so happy, and if I don't, I feel like I'm failing.
Yep. Oh,
That's a great. I was so, and it's not one person. Several people have asked me, but Olga, I'm confused. What's the line between codependency and people pleasing? Like, what are
yeah.
your thoughts on that?
Mm. Like this is why sometimes I like labels and I like words because they help us speak to our experiences. But sometimes when we get so in our heads about like, is this or is this that? It doesn't matter. How does it feel? How do you feel when you're doing it, right? And I think someone who's bringing that question up, right? There's likely some sort of something going on internally of like, this doesn't feel quite right. And my thought around that is whether it feels more like people pleasing or whether it feels more codependent is the question of, are you betraying yourself in order to show up or please somebody else?
Oh, I love that question. Are you betraying yourself in order to show up for somebody? Love it.
Yeah, because the thing about it, right, is like it feels good to help other people. It feels good to be available for the people that we love. It helps us form relationships. It helps us create vulnerable connection, which again, like as human beings, we need that. But when we are doing that to our own detriment, that is where it becomes unsustainable and oftentimes problematic and can create patterns or habits over time that are depleting. And that's what makes it unsustainable, right? And then we grow further and further and further away from our true selves And all of a sudden, our life looks like doing all of the things for all of the people around us, or waiting for somebody to give us the go ahead before we can do something or say something, right? And then we start to feel resentful.
And you just brought back like a memory I have of most of my I only serve women currently, and most of my clients will come to me usually on that first session saying, I feel lost, I don't
Yeah.
know where my voice is. And I think what you're saying kind of relates to that sense. Sometimes when we are so preoccupied with helping or being all things to all people, we lose that connection to ourself. What did you call it? Home, like true self, to your true
Uh-huh.
self. And so you no longer know what is it that you want, how is it that you want it, and why you want it. Which is why I brought this up to my coaching cohort, because I want people to normalize understanding their needs, having that voice, and vocalizing that. What are some of the strategies that you walk people through when you're trying to help them grow that trust in self connection, and maybe create like growing that aware? I'm sure you work based on awareness like myself,
Yeah.
so growing that awareness on the times that they're looking for that external validation. To what degree will you say this is helpful or not helpful? I do love that you started by saying when we get into our heads, I see that, I'm sure you see it with your clients, we get into concepts and then looking like, is this that label? So I love that. One of the conditions to this conversation is let's not get stuck on labels. Let's just notice
Yeah.
how we feel. Like, what are some of these strategies, Chelsea, that you kind of walk people through?
Yeah. So I'm all about making things, like you said before, feel as simple and approachable as possible. One thing that I notice very often, just living in the world and the time that we do exist right now, is that we're trying to do so much all at the same time. And so my first offering that many people are often like very resistant to. So I just want to preface this where if you feel resistance coming up, that's okay. But my first thought is like, hey, when are you making time to hear yourself? Where are you slowing down? How are you intentionally checking in with yourself? And this could be 3 minutes in the morning. It could be 5 minutes on your lunch break. It could be on the drive to pick up kids, depending on where you live in the world and what that looks like right now. Um, but creating time and space where you are asking yourself, how am I feeling right now? How am I feeling about how I'm engaging with my life, with the people in my life? How do I feel in my physical body? Right? That's something that, again, when we're so busy and we're just in go, go, go mode, we don't check in with ourselves and our body, which oftentimes has a lot of guidance for us. But because we're on this wheel of like, I have to keep going, I have to be productive, I have to show up for everybody else instead of me, I have to make sure that everyone else's needs are met, I have to make sure I do this specific thing for my partner every single day, no matter what, or they're not going to love me, right? That idea of, can I take 5 minutes to check in with myself and really ask how I'm feeling, for some people feels really jarring because we don't want to know the answer.
Yeah, I think that's crucial. I think most people are afraid of finding answers
Yep.
or listening to their own voice.
Yep.
And I recently was interviewing somebody who said to me one of the reasons she has never taken action to lower her anxiety is because she doesn't feel ready to unload those
Mhm.
emotions. And what would that do? And often that feels like heavy work. But probably you agree with me. Nothing is more heavy work than ignoring yourself, and nothing is going to cost you more emotionally and time wise and in relationships than not listening to those answers. And you know what? They're never as scary as whatever your mind is telling. They are like never as scary as what your mind tells you. I know you're married, right, Chelsea? How long have you been
Yeah, I
married?
have been married for 3.5 years.
And so, how do you practice in your own personal marriage, like these boundaries and like this cultivating of your own independence while still growing together? I think that we can dive into a bit of what we do, because I think that people who have relationship anxiety and who might have codependent tendencies out of fear of being abandoned or rejected, which is
Mm,
human to have of both fears,
yeah.
end up staying in scenarios where they don't like it or end up not being truthful to themselves because of that fear of like, oh, maybe this is gonna end our relationship. And
Totally.
nobody wants to end up right. We all want to be like, if we could all know that, oh, this is it and it's gonna work for life. Like I think that most of us, especially women, will jump on that. We'll be like,
Yeah. Sign me up.
yeah, that works for me. This is it. This is my mate partner. Okay, my forever partner. Awesome. I am happy to know. How do you navigate through that? How do you I know that your husband is also pretty busy, military human,
Yep.
right? Like he's in the military, and so
Yep.
I'm sure that that creates some spaces that are perhaps unwanted. So how do you
Yeah.
guys navigate through this?
Yeah. Such a great question. And I think for me, the way that I really like to view a romantic partnership, and this is like my personal ideology, I guess, is two people who are growing separately but together, and in that are consciously choosing each other again and again and again and again. But I myself, Chelsea, am separate than my husband. And I think in the beginning of our relationship, that was really hard actually for me to understand. And I was super young when we first started dating. Um, and so I feel really grateful right now. My husband and I regularly have conversations about what do we want separately as individuals and what do we want together as a couple. And we dialogue about that pretty frequently, I would say. And it's not like a scheduled meeting that we have once a week or anything like that. But I would say probably at least once a month, we're circling back to that on a big picture scale so we don't get lost in the day to day minutia. And I think one thing that's really great for each of us is that we also both hold interests and hobbies that we give each other like full reign and full permission to invest time, energy, money into because we recognize, like, hey, John loves to golf and like it's not my thing. I've tried it. I've really no, thank you. I have no, not even like 1% of me is interested in the golf game. Like no.
Not for you.
But like when John comes home from golf, I'm like, you're a better human. And when I come home from a yoga class or a walk with one of my friends or whatever it might be, I'm excited about life. I feel good. I want to share that. And I think for both of us, we notice that energy. So we also like when things start to feel off, one of the ways that we hold that boundary is I might say to John, like, hey, things aren't feeling so great. Like, what do you need right now? What do you need for you? And it might be for him, like, I just need to watch Netflix and not talk. I just need to go work out. I just need to go to bed earlier tonight. I just need, right? And I'm part of this is not personalizing that, right? So it's like allowing each of us to have our own emotions because we absolutely will. And whether it's because of a pandemic or something that happens at work or him going out to sea, it's like this is challenging sometimes. And there are a lot of things that happen to us that we don't have control over. Just as human beings, we're going to have an emotional response to that. So part of the work for me has been not over personalizing his emotions.
Yeah, I would say with that too. On my current marriage, and hopefully last one I'll have, I we had such a powerful, strong connection. We got married 10 months after we met,
Amazing.
and Chris and I are both highly like determined humans
Hmm.
and decisive and confident. And so we met, and a month after, we're getting married. Yeah, yeah, we could see the future. We're like, we're gonna, this
Yeah.
is gonna work. And I don't know why, because prior to that, I had all the fears that I couldn't possibly choose a right partner because, I had just been separated or divorced. And I met Chris and he was like, oh yeah, no, this is it. And not because we're the same. We're so drastically different. But
Yeah.
we have found, I think, in those differences, something really powerful to bring to the table. We have never been the kind of couple who want to be the same.
Uh-huh.
And I think being with Chris has really, because he's so confident and independent and so into, this is what I like. I like golfing and skiing and partying. And so I'm going to do those things. You can come or you cannot come, and I'll be
Mhm.
okay.
Mhm.
To be with somebody who was going to be okay regardless
Mhm.
challenged me because I wasn't needed. And I think that's what some of my clients kind of go back to, like, how do, is this codependent that I want to be there and be needed to help them? And it
Yeah.
challenged me to the core. Like Chris would be like, oh, you said you have a yoga class, so I'm just finishing our supper quickly so that you get to go. For the first time in my life, I'm dating somebody who's not saying like, oh, stay, don't go to yoga,
Uh-huh.
which I would have been like, twist my arm. Okay, I'm not going to yoga. But
Right?
yoga is such a big discipline of mine. And Chris was like, yeah, go. And
Mhm.
when I do not practice yoga or meditation, guess who's the first person to notice it? Chris will be asking me, like, have you been meditating?
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm like, why? Well, I'm just,
Just
just
wondering.
noticing what is happening. So I think that that's one thing. The other thing is that I remove an expectation that it was my husband's job to make me happy.
Yeah. Mm.
And this is what I was referring to earlier, when sometimes there are concepts that we grabbed from somewhere, I don't really know where, Hollywood or otherwise, I don't know where,
Mhm.
that we think, oh, it is my husband's job to make me happy. And we keep them to such an accountability
Mhm.
where we completely release
Mhm.
our responsibility of making ourselves happy. And I think people think it's selfish, but like, if I spend the time or the money on my hobbies, on the things that make me happy, but I don't know you, I look at my husband as my role model. This guy
Yeah.
doesn't think twice to go spend money and go golfing with his friends. He has a need, he meets his need. He doesn't
Uh-huh.
wait and beg me, please, could you please go golfing with me? He
Yep.
goes and does it. And initially I resented that. I'm like, oh, you should invite me, you should include me, you didn't think of me. What am I gonna do on Saturday when you go golfing?
Yeah.
Like I somehow had these expectations that he was gonna, I don't know, plan life for me. And
Mm.
so I think that that's some of the things that I have kind of begun to understand and to choose how I want to show up to
Yeah.
this relationship with myself and within the marriage. And
Mhm.
I love the points that you bring forward where you see each other as two very different humans
Mhm.
growing together and on and allowing that time and that effort, that space for somebody, your partner, to take time, money, and anything that they need to show
Yeah.
up home
Yeah.
feeling complete and
Yeah. And I love that description that you just walked through and how you've experienced this, because I think it just really beautifully speaks to the power of self-responsibility, right? And again, like when maybe we are somebody who isn't as confident or doesn't know what they enjoy, or is feeling like in a season of life where they're questioning who they are, we can tend to latch on to people or things around us to give us some sense of self concept. And if we're in it, and I think, again, this is my own personal opinion, I think we all go through seasons of life where we are experiencing that. So it's about, I think, shifting the perspective of like, how is this person showing up for me? How are they meeting my needs? Are they doing everything that I need them to? Right. And really like relying on someone else to bring us that sense of stability, comfort, self, whatever it might be. To then saying, like, okay, if I don't know what I need right now, or if I'm not feeling so great, or if I'm questioning myself and I notice that my confidence is dipping, or whatever it might be, where's that coming from? What do I need for me in this moment? Right. So it's so much a shift in the questions that we ask ourselves in that moment. It's not necessarily all that, it depends on the circumstance. Obviously, every circumstance is going to be different, but it's not always about the other person.
Almost never. In my experience,
Yeah.
almost never. My clients know, they're like, "Oh my God, Olga, I'm not telling you about this. I'm like just waiting for you to say like, actually, it has nothing to do with your husband. Let's just look into you."
Yep.
And I do the work myself. Like I love blaming my husband. Like easier if it was all his fault. But truly, whose perception is it? Who's the person who's not happy? Who's this person with this strong emotion? And what can
Yeah.
I do about it?
Hmm.
You said something that I think is very important that we highlight, and is that you do not personalize your husband needing to not be with you,
Yeah.
needing to be quiet, or needing to process things, or needing to just do nothing with his friends and needing time apart.
Hmm.
I think most people with codependent tendencies personalize everything.
Oh,
It
yeah.
must be that I'm not good enough. It must be that he doesn't love me. It must be that, and make it about themselves, creating a crazy amount of suffering. And again, holding their partners accountable for something they have not said or meant at all, right? And so there it
Yeah.
creates some level of conflict. I think that it seems invisible, but it comes from taking things personally that do not belong to ourselves to take. Each
Yeah.
human has their own way of processing. And don't you love having time with the girls where
Yeah.
your husband is not around? It's amazing. And that
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
love them any less. We have different needs. One thing that I've seen happening, especially now in COVID, I feel that is more predominant, is that we have one husband or one long term partner, and we want them to be our best friend, and we want them to be our lovers, and we want them to be our business partner, and we want them to be our co-parents, and we want them to be our doctors and our therapists, and then we just give one human all the titles, and
Yep.
then we're like disappointed that they're only fulfilling a few.
Yeah.
Real life, we have to have friends and a doctor and a coach and like party person, and then your
Hmm.
husband can just be that, a husband.
Yeah.
So I think that that's also part of the codependency, not growing our circles and just expecting one person to have the answers to all of our emotional needs.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because even as you describe that, I think about like, man, how much pressure that would feel like to be on the receiving end. And like, can we really expect one human being to be everything and all of it? And then immediately my mind is like, but sometimes that's the messaging that we receive, is that when you find your person, everything else will be okay because they're your person and they have all the answers. And it's like, am I allowed to curse on here?
Yeah.
What kind of bullshit is that? Like, what human being can be everything and more?
We cannot be everything and
No.
more. Right? Like we need to go see the therapist. We need to go swimming. We need to go see the pool person. We need to do, we need a system around us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's amazing.
Yeah. And it really is so much. And this is where, again, like part of my passion for this work and these types of conversations comes through, is because we've got to shift the conversation so that we normalize having a network, having a team, and having that be more than just like a romantic partner and a group of friends. Because again, like, yes, those are important, valuable aspects. And sometimes when we're talking about like the intricacies of what's going on internally or in our bodies, or we're going to want like an expert or someone who is trained in a specific thing to partner with. Right. And so building out a team of support and whatever that might need to look like, whatever pieces feel most important to you right now, and normalizing that of like the value of investing in ourselves in all of these different ways, so that in the roles that we play, both for ourselves and the people around us, we're showing up more often to our fullest capacity that we can, rather than feeling like I'm trying to hold 17,000 balls in the air all by myself, and like, where's my husband, or why isn't my partner showing up, or I'm single and how can I possibly expect to hold all of these things by myself? Well, you can't. You're a human being. What support do you have? How are you investing in that? How are you allowing yourself to lean in for that in these different ways so that nobody is feeling completely overloaded and developing an unhealthy exchange, aka codependent tendencies, that then causes a lot of friction in a relationship, whether it be a romantic or a friendship or a professional or whatever it might be.
And that's what I found interesting about my own codependency tendencies is that I think I was intentionally engaging in those behaviors for the purpose of staying together. And like that's what I
Mm.
thought togetherness. Meanwhile, my partners probably felt suffocated by my intensity of like, let's just do everything together. When in reality, it is those tendencies that actually end up making relationships not sustainable.
Yep.
The why nobody can have that level of pressure on themselves forever.
Yeah.
Like, let me be your all. Like, nobody wants to do that. The other concept we haven't talked about is, and then you do like I bring this up as a very confident human. Even when I was maybe in these relationships, I would have felt confident, but my lack of confidence clearly showed up
Yeah.
when I was in an intimate relationship, and I'm like, please don't leave me. Like, how can I become worthy for you? How can I become like this attractive star that you want to have next to you at all times?
Hmm.
Um, and the thing that we you sort of briefly touched on that I think is important for us to talk about is you're not an incomplete human looking for your other half, your better half. Like
Yeah.
it drives me insane when people say, I'm looking for my better half, or this is my better half. I am nobody's half. I am a whole human, okay? I am a
Hmm.
circle on my own. I'm nobody's half. I never want to be anybody's half, and I don't want to cut myself in half. I am full.
Yeah.
And I think that concept also was, taught to us from an early stage, or I don't know where it comes from, where we become one because we're each
Yeah.
halves, walking as a half. And I really honestly felt that I needed a half, that I was looking for my better half. And understanding what wholeness means to you, like that you are a complete human.
Yeah.
And so that if this was like, I don't know if I can make sense of these two complete circles, what's in the middle is what you have in common. That intersection is what keeps you together. But
Mhm.
if you were to split up, you're still two complete circles. You haven't lost you. You never lost you. You always knew you. And you just joining forces, sort of like what you were saying with your husband, where you remain two very unique individuals.
Yeah.
And often that's what brought you to be in love with the other person, that you were you and
Mhm.
that you was different from me.
Mhm.
And so that, we can have like these joint commonalities of desire of wanting to be together, but not let's just amalgamate into one big circle.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this gets hard sometimes as our lives, like in relationship with someone, get more and more enmeshed, right? We start to get to know each other's friends. Maybe we have kids together. Maybe we own a house together. Maybe we're living together, whatever it might be. Sometimes it can feel hard to view that separation, and I can certainly appreciate throughout, especially the past year, of like having so many limitations on what we can do outside of our homes or of the people who are like the closest to us, that might feel hard to internally keep that perspective. So my thought or my offering for anyone listening might be like, what are the things, where are the places, what are the moments where you feel whole, where you feel the most you, where you can start to see yourself or your life from a little bit of a different perspective or a little bit of a higher view? And how can we lean into that a bit more, a bit more, a bit more? If this kind of like codependent tendency is something that's showing up for you, to help you start to practice and create little like maybe experiments for yourself of what it feels like to continue to take that radical self responsibility that we were talking about before, and take a little bit more ownership and start to feel into this concept of I am whole because I am me. Done. Period. That's it.
And I think I give, you don't know me much, but I give meaning to everything I do. Like everything I do in my existence has meaning of some sort.
Hmm.
So something that helped me also for listeners into understanding that I was whole and bringing that to the table. Like I always wanted to know, what do I bring to the table? In previous relationships, I always felt that what I brought to the table was the therapist in me, the social worker. Like, I'll help you solve your problems. You tell me your problems. So of course I would select all these humans that had problems as
Yeah.
my partners because I felt of value. When I noticed that was the choice that was getting me, say, in trouble in these not sustainable relationships, I began to connect to the activities that really felt like me. This is me. Like going to yoga was me. That was my
Yeah.
element. Going
Yes.
for walks, that's my element. Uh, Helping, coaching people, that's all I want to do every day. Doesn't matter what. I love it. I never feel drained by my work. I feel empowered by my work. I love teaching meditation classes, So I began to notice where I felt the happiest and intentionally growing my time in doing those, my identity
Yeah.
as that coach, as that teacher, as that yogi. I have a yoga training to teach. I hate teaching. I hate teaching yoga. I love practicing yoga. I never
Uh-huh.
knew I was not going to like teaching it. Don't like it, love practicing it.
Beautiful.
So I've invested in that. And in my marriage, because I am a very like emotionally healthy, independent human who does not need me.
Uh-huh.
And that challenged me at first because I know Chris can be completely happy on his own. He will miss my absence for sure, but this guy will not be like broken into 5 million pieces. And my ego doesn't love knowing that.
Uh-huh.
My healthy mind loves knowing that.
Yep.
I decided what my role was because my role was challenged. If I'm not the helper in this
Mm.
dynamic, who am I? And so I've given myself two meanings. Primarily, I am the heart of my home.
Mm.
And I own that like so fully. I love being the heart of this home.
Yeah.
One of the first things Chris said to me when we moved into his home before our home was ready.
Sure.
He said, "You made of this house a home." And that gave me the idea that I was the heart of our home. I
Mm.
feel things. I am the person who expresses emotions. Every corner in my home has feelings. And
Yeah.
I own that. That's what I bring to the table. How can we feel this? How does that feel? Like I use all the heart loving words in our home. Like that is me. And I love having defined my role as the heart. I don't need to be anything else. I love being the heart. The heart is
Yeah.
central. And I think that brings me back to what my role is. And the other role that I've given myself is that I am water. I am
Mm.
in my own zodiac sign. I am water, but also I like that's who I am. That's my personality. I'm far more calm. I can just being in tune with my feelings is part of who I am. So
Yep.
in moments of chaos, in moments of like, oh, our family is going through something,
Yeah.
I come back to this choice that I've made that I am water. So what would water be doing here? What would I be washing away? What would I be like? What are the
Mm.
waves doing right at this moment? That's how I operate. I give things purpose and meaning. And that has been so helpful to me to remind myself what I bring to the table. Both water and heart are parts of my personality. I just grabbed who I was, gave them
Yeah.
and a role, and I just try to show up as much as I can with
Yeah.
elements.
I love that. And I got goosebumps as you were describing that because it's just so like poignant and clear and candid. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
In being heart and water, and I know like working in a helping professional, that resonates with me a lot, right? Being able to bring that calm, that perspective, that meaning. How do you differentiate being those things in your world, in your home, with your family, from being in the helper role?
I bring them with me. Like these two elements that I call elements, being the heart and water, if I was to define them and describe them to you as like what traits, like they will end up being traits of my personality.
Yeah.
Like that's just who I am. Like when I stand
Yeah.
in the room, there is calm. I know I bring on that full force. Also, when I stand in the room, there's love. I
Mm.
know that. I own it. I call it. It's going to be with me and it's never gonna leave me. I'm both of these things. And I think that having named my traits something and grouped them
Yeah.
allow me to always understand what I bring to the table, if that makes sense. So like whether I'm doing this professionally, I want to bring water and I want to bring the heart. Like how I only work in subjects that are I'm passionate about. I only
Hmm.
work with clients that I feel I sincerely can and want to guide and coach.
Sure.
Um, I only, so I feel that I in this particular case, there's no boundaries for me to not be.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's giving me permission to be who I was already.
Yeah. I
Does
love
that
that.
yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I think it's so beautiful because, again, it's like that self ownership. Like, here's what I bring, here's who I am. This comes with me no matter where I am or what I'm doing. And thinking about, like, for each of us, if we could consider that, I think that's such a beautiful way to encapsulate getting to know yourself, to encapsulate like letting you be you no matter where you are. Like, for example, I'm just thinking about if someone felt like, well, I feel like what I bring is fire,
I was
right?
gonna
Like, I'm excited, I'm ready to light things up. I see people for who they are and I'm like, let it shine. And I'm always that encouragement and I'm ready to like shake shit up, right? Maybe that feels more like fire for someone. To think about like what does that look like in the different places that you show up in your life, in the different roles that you play. So I really love kind of like coming back to those elements and being able to own that and be with that and using that as an offering of getting to know yourself and separating maybe what you bring from people around you to help create some more diffusion or distance between some of those codependent tendencies. Like, you get to be heart and water, someone else gets to be fire and something else, right? And we need all of these things in the world. And so again, it's like, not there's nothing better or worse than another. There's nothing right or wrong. It's
no.
just like ownership.
I think when you own it, like Chris, I would describe Chris as fire. And that's
Mm,
one of the things that I need. I love
yeah.
he will wake me up. If I'm like, oh, this is like quiet, Chris will be like, let's go for a run. Like his speed is at a different level compared to mine. Like Chris never gets tired. Like the other night he went to bed at 6:30 in the morning because he was
Wow.
working on something that he just could not put away. Um, that will never be me. I'm like, I need to sleep. Like, and then he took a 2 hour nap, and then he was up again working and doing things that he needed. He doesn't do this on a regular basis, but he operates at a very different energy level than I. I need 8 hours of sleep. Thank you very much, and then I will probably functional the next day.
Yeah.
Understanding Chris, like, so I gave him meanings. Like he in my world, he's the sun or the fire. Like he's just
Mm,
right and up,
mhm.
and he is the neck of our
Mm,
home. Like
I love
he
that.
just has this sense of direction. He knows where he's going. Like he's holding the head. Not to minimize that, I cannot obviously, but he is
Yeah.
very much in that role of like, this is the project. This is where we're going. This is what we're doing. And I let him play that role, which I think is also so important to have given meaning to what I bring to the table. Then I became curious about what he brings to the table. Chris doesn't
Yeah.
think in these terms. He will never say, "Hey, I'm the sun, I'm the fire." Like I can never have my husband saying those things. Nor do I need him to. But that's what I've defined him. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. How can I be the supportive element to allow him to show up as who he is?
Yeah.
And I think
Mhm.
I think in the codependency tendencies, we want to be the same. We feel threatened by water and fire. That doesn't mix well. Like that would
Mm.
not be it. Whereas I see it as like, ah, thank God we're not both water. Like nobody will be like, I don't know what this house would be if we were both water. I would probably find that boring actually. I
Yeah.
because I find it so interesting that he challenges my speed of life.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about before of like not over personalizing or having somebody's strengths or shine in some way means something less about who we are, right? Like, we all have value just by being ourselves. We have innate value and worthiness, and our contribution and who we are is incredibly significant and impactful. So, what I hear you saying is like how can we lean into that? How can we encourage the people around us to like bring their stuff that they offer more innately than I might offer, right? Like you were saying before, like you can be the neck, but that might not be the thing that is second nature to you, like being the heart in the water, right? And so, like, rather than feeling like you need to be it all or you need someone else to be it all, can we allow ourselves more space to just be? Mm, I
And
love,
I'll
love,
be
love that.
challenged by that, right? But seeing the wealth, like
Yeah.
the wealth in that being different. I am a big fan of diversity
Hmm.
in all possible ways.
Yep.
And I love that my household is full of diversity, not
Hmm.
only physically and culturally, but our personalities are so different. What we both experience, we grew up in different countries. We grew up with
Yeah.
two different first languages. We're raising our son really amalgamating our cultures. I heard my husband feed my son a fruit that is very Colombian, and he was like, "This is how we eat it," and he was using some Spanish words. To me, that melts my heart. He's not
Hmm.
trying to just teach his French culture. He's trying to embrace, showing Mateo that we embrace both cultures. Very significant for me because we're not in my country. So
Yeah.
we have it. It's such a big effort, and I think all of those have been easy things for in our marriage to coexist because of ultimately, honestly, my intentionality of just owning who I am and showing up. And when we show up
Yeah.
with that freedom of being who we are, we give our partners permission to be who they are, and we feel far more appreciated
Hmm.
than old Olga, who was so concerned about being appreciated that was never was showing up as a shadow of who she was.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Like I wouldn't fully say like I hate golfing. Like leave me alone. I'll be like making efforts to like golfing at all costs, just to be like, I
Yeah.
see this might be a difference that might break us apart. Like, what would we do when you go golfing for a week? And where would I go? Like I have zero
Hmm.
interest in downhill skiing. My husband loves snowboarding. That would be something he's gonna take my son, and both of them can have those days. And
Yeah.
I'm just happy to be home practicing yoga while they come back. Like that would
Yeah.
be it.
Yeah. And I think it's, again, it's so much about not making somebody's light or strengths mean anything about ours, right? And not making everything have to be equivalent or perfectly balanced or the same all of the time, because it's not realistic. And I think to your point before of, when we give ourselves permission to show up and own who we really are, we are modeling that for the people around us to also feel like they have full permission to be who they really are. And so I see in relationship, it's so much about like learning with you and whoever the other person is in the relationship, like how do we coexist together in these ways? How do we allow for our differences, our similarities, our strengths, our dreams that align together and our dreams that are separate, our needs that are more in line, our needs that are different, to coexist without needing to make anybody less or more right or wrong. And I think that that kind of is subliminally the message that we can be having in the back of our minds, that when we bring it to the forefront, like that awareness piece that you were mentioning before, then we can more intentionally decide, like, okay, well, what do I want to do with this? Does this belief or this dialogue or this vision of a relationship, is that supportive? Is that still serving me? Is that still helpful? And again, it's like we don't have to place blame or place fault, but it's more so just like in the here and the now, is this serving you in your life? Is this helping you or your partner or your relationship flourish? Or is this something that maybe we want to figure out, how do we play with this? How do we let go of this? How do we release it so that we can meet each other more and more and more where we are or with what we're needing?
Sorry, I love the coexisting term
Hmm.
because what it suggests is that there has to be an in between.
Yeah.
It's you, there is me, and there has to be an in between. And what would I need? That's the question I ask myself every morning: is What kind of a wife do I want to show up as today?
Yeah.
Versus what do you need from me today?
Mhm.
I know it's a weird way to approach it, but I need to ask myself, because if I think he needs something that I don't want to show up as, I'm gonna run into this codependency altogether, people pleasing and not pleasing anybody.
Yeah.
So I think that those, in like bottom line for anybody listening, getting to know yourself, getting to know your needs, being okay communicating your needs, even if it's hard for you to begin with baby steps. I need a hug. Like, my disappointment with my husband has diminished so much ever since I've been able to clearly vocalize what I need.
Yep.
And some women get annoyed that they have to do this, but wouldn't you love to have clear messages like, hey, if you hug me in the mornings, I love you 10 times fold because that's all I needed. Oh, that's easy. I could, so many times we are left thinking, I wish I had known this.
Mhm.
And I feel that I did have an expectation that my husband was to know my needs randomly and then supply them, even
Mhm.
if my needs were like a coffee, not super hot, just a little bit more, like all these very specific things that I thought everybody knows, common sense. Don't you know me?
Yep.
I've come to realize my needs change by the day, by the week, by the hour. Like, what I told Chris I wanted might not be exactly what I want next hour.
Yep.
Um, when I gave birth, before giving birth, I was like craving ice cubes. I just wanted to eat ice cubes. I was driving everybody crazy. I give birth, and the 2 hours later, Chris goes, the hospital. Ice is the best one because it's already kind of crushed. Brings me the biggest glass he found of ice. And I was like, why? Why are you bringing me? He's like, 2 hours ago, you loved this. And I'm like, that's so 2 hours ago. Like, I don't want to see any eyes anymore. Like, I'm done with that craving. And I use that example because that is honestly how fast our needs might change. And that's okay as long as we can communicate those.
Yes. Yeah. Nobody here is mind readers. Nobody. And it says nothing to the quote unquote strength of a relationship
Mhm.
if you feel like someone knows exactly what you need, because the truth is that no one ever can.
Not even you. You have to
Yeah.
ask yourself, what do I want this hour? Like, how am I feeling and what do I need?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, again, it can contribute to so much pressure and discord in a relationship when we're signing up for that idea that if someone really knows me, they should know exactly what I need in every moment, and I shouldn't have to communicate. It's like, well, who's that helping? And how's that facilitating a healthy relationship? And how is that like, do you want that pressure on you to anticipate someone else's every feeling, need, desire, thought? Like, I certainly don't, for me personally. And again, it's like, that is the power of healthy communication and being able to normalize. A lot of work that I do so often is about like, how do we get more comfortable with discomfort so that we can have important conversations, right? And be okay with that.
How do you coach people through that discomfort? Like, what will you say to, like, I do this work myself, but I'm just for the sake of the listeners, because my not non-confident clients who might have codependent tendencies are terrified of discomfort. They
Ah,
will go through any extent to not feel that discomfort, even though they live in discomfort. Like, that's the part that to me is like, well, you're not really like looking at the ongoing discomfort you live in by not speaking your mind.
yeah. And I think for so many, sometimes a differentiating factor is one, the discomfort that they are experiencing is familiar. And two, what I often hear from people is that, well, this discomfort feels okay because it only impacts me. Versus if I am experiencing discomfort in conversation or in relationship with somebody else, I don't want them to then think poorly of me or be disappointed by me or so on and so forth. So it's like, I will own this discomfort, even though it feels awful, but I'm the only one who's suffering. And I often find that that's kind of like the story that we tell ourselves about what justifies one discomfort over another. Meanwhile, I think as we know, certainly as helping professionals, like even that internal discomfort that you're telling yourself doesn't impact someone else, it's impacting the relationship in some way, because the likelihood is then that like you're not showing up as you. right? Because you're filtering yourself, or you're not meeting your own needs, or you're not asking for what's coming up for you, or whatever it might be. So my first thought, right, with working on this is to just start to get to know what discomfort feels like in your body. Like, how does your body send you signals that it's uncomfortable? Does your heart start racing? Does your stomach feel uncomfortable? Are your palms sweating, right? Like, even just getting to know, like, what are those first responses for you can be really helpful, because then when it's happening, what we can do is we can normalize that,
Mhm.
right? Of just like, okay, this is just my body responding to a trigger or a discomfort. It's okay if my heart's beating quickly. It's okay if my stomach is upset. It's okay if my palms are sweating. And we can talk to ourselves like we would a little kid who is
We
scared.
probably have felt this before and survived it.
A
Like,
hundred
I
percent.
I know what these feelings are. They didn't kill me before.
A
They're not
hundred.
gonna kill me now. I'm good. One thing that I wanna capture because I thought it was so key is that when we do not show up as ourselves, what ends up happening is and we don't show up authentically because not because we want to not be authentic, but because we're this people pleasing mode where we're like, what do you need? How do you want this? Like
Yep.
all about that person, not so much about what's happening inside of ourselves. We end up not connecting deeply.
Hmm.
We end up having really superficial relationships. Nobody's gonna open up to somebody who they can't tell for a fact I can read this person. Nothing is more trust building
Yep.
than knowing, oh, I know this person in and out, I can trust them. But when somebody's always giving you the right to go, like whatever you say, whatever you think, I don't trust them. I'm always like, but what do you think? I want to hear your like fight me. Like tell me that this is not it.
Yeah.
Like it cannot be that you always agree with everything I say. So that those connections are not as deep. Another great reason to stop and ask yourself to connect with yourself, to honor what you bring to the table. Who you are is beautiful and whole, and you've got so much to offer. I know it's easier said than done when you doubt your own worth. But if you're listening to this and if you think that what we're saying sounds like Chinese to you, because really you cannot bring yourself to that self acceptance, self acknowledgement of who you are, you will be giving yourself a gift by getting yourself a coach to work on this.
Mm.
It's so worth it. Like, I never regret the psychotherapy I've done, the coaching I've done. It has allowed me to trust that I am the water and the heart,
Yeah.
to own it, to walk confidently into any room saying, I cannot be many things in here, but I'll be the heart. Like,
Yeah.
that I own, that I know I am. No matter where I go, I'll be the heart. That's my role. I think that that is the value of doing any kind of work, even if it's by yourself, to recognize who you are and love it. Like make a vote that says, "Hey, I like you, Olga. I'm gonna be you fully. I'm taking a commitment to be who you are."
Yeah. So powerful, so valuable. Yeah. And I think if this is something, I mean, I have not yet met a human being who doesn't struggle with this on some level, of just like being who they are, or being like taking ownership of that in a genuine way. And I mean, to have this pressure that we're going to be able to just like listen to a podcast episode or read all of the books and it's going to sink in. Like, no, this is something that takes practice, and it takes intention, and having spaces and places where you can air out what feels sticky or what feels hard or what resistance you're experiencing or what you're unsure about. It is so powerful. And I would just echo what you've said. Like, I practice everything that I preach. It
Same.
is a huge value of mine to do that and to invest in what I support my clients in investing in. And same thing, like, I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't be the person that I am. I wouldn't have the relationships that I do. I wouldn't do the work that I do had I not given myself that permission to find the spaces, the people, the places where I could really learn and explore, like, what does this look like for me? How does this feel? And whether that was therapy or coaching or whatever it might be, yeah, it has completely transformed who I am and what my life looks like and how I engage with it.
You know what? I believe you, and I believe you because I've experienced it myself. And so, what I think adds so much value to our conversation is that we're both trained therapists. We're both life coaches. We're both helpers. We're both human.
Mhm.
And we have gone through and we've walked the walk. And we're coming to you to say, one, it's possible. Two,
Yeah.
it's normal. Anything you feel, it's normal. Any struggle, relationships will be the most complex thing that we'll ever get to do as humans. Why? Because each human is so complex. So
Yep.
that makes sense. And we're coming to tell you we've done the work. We continue to invest in the things that help us, whether that's a yoga membership, drinking the right kind of water, the supplements, all of it. I think that our approach is to our own lives very holistic. And I know the type of work that you provide as well with your clients is holistic. So if
Yep.
anything that you're walking away from this conversation is that a really good answer to end codependent relationships or tendencies is to really invest in you, to get to know you, to be unapologetic about being who you are. And I know that sounds easier said than done, but if you do the work, you also can get to be where Chelsea and I are from this space at this moment where we're sharing with you how we feel. Chelsea, where can people follow you? Where can people find you? Where do you want to send people? I'm gonna have all of your info in the show notes as well, but just let them know where they can say, I like you, I want to follow you.
Yeah. So I hang out on Instagram a lot. You can find me at Chelsea Connors with an underscore at the end. And then I also recently launched a YouTube channel, which I'm super excited about. I will be sharing new episodes every Tuesday for right now. They might change, but for right now, it's Tuesday. So those would be two really awesome places to hang out with me. And then I also just wanted to share if you're feeling a little bit conflicted about how all of this works and like a genuine, non icky way to develop more self trust or inner confidence. I have a free workshop that is available on demand. So if you find me on YouTube or on Instagram and I can send you the link, you can download that and just plug into that and see how that lands.
Oh, that's amazing. What's the workshop on?
It
What?
is 4 steps to develop more self trust and self confidence. So
Oh, I love it.
exactly what we've been talking about.
Awesome.
Yep.
So if you're listening to this, go grab that resource. I think that's amazing. Follow Chelsea. She'll never disappoint you. She always shows up so genuinely and with so many helpful, real, concrete steps. So if you enjoy following this podcast, I promise you, you will enjoy following Chelsea as well. Chelsea, from the bottom of my heart, thank you because you've done this twice now with me,
Oh.
and I can't wait to bring you back to talk about something
Oh.
else. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is awesome.